This is an encore presentation of Disclosure, brought to you by the Voice of Prophecy.
Well, wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I guess it all depends on where you happen to be listening to the, well, what would you call them, Jean? The chocolatey, velvety tones of my voice.
Chocolate.
Does that sound?
New.
Yeah, it's chocolatey. I don't even like chocolate.
No,
I don't like chocolate. Well, listen, it is time for another hour of good company, good Bible study, and mostly good ideas. Although most of the good ideas come from the other side of the table here in studio. Those would be your ideas, Jean, and the irresponsible ideas, that's my department, right?
Well, I won't debunk that. That sounds about accurate.
That's the way it should be. I put out the wrong ideas, and my wife fixes them with her Bible open. That's the way that it works in our house anyway, and so we may as well make it work that way here. You keep me on the straight and narrow.
I do my best.
Now, my bride of 26 years. We've been married 26 years. You don't seem like you're old enough to have been married for 26 years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Definitely looking old enough if you look at the gray hair and the wrinkles around the eyes.
I like your gray hair. No, it wasn't age that gave you gray hair, though.
No.
It was me.
Maybe. The gray hair started after we got married.
You had gray hair when I met you.
I did.
A little
I did have a little
splash,
tiny...
A little splash in the front.
Streak. That's right in the front.
I like it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hot. It's like,
you're probably alone in that.
You
but
are
thank you, honey.
You are my gray-haired hottie. All right.
Okay.
We're going to talk about actually marriage, even though I just probably ended mine right now. We're going to talk about marriage and dating and those good things. But before we get going, I've got to share a story with you. Have you ever heard of a guy by the name of, and I don't know if I'm going to get this right, Anatoly Bugorsky? Anatoly Bugorsky. You heard of him?
No, I haven't heard of him.
Well, here's who he is. I'd never heard of him before, like last week either.
Okay.
He's a scientist. And he's famous in the scientific circles for something that, frankly, is a little bit, well, horrific. Back in 1978, Anatoly, I don't know, is that how you pronounce that? Anatoly?
Anatoli?
Anatoly?
No, Anatoly.
Anatoly.
I think that would be what I would
yeah, I think so too. All right. Well, in 1978, he's working at a particle accelerator, right? And so he accidentally leans into the particle beam while the thing is still on.
Oh my.
And so this stream of really high energy protons go through the back of his head, and I guess it comes out somewhere near his nose. They were able to pinpoint where this thing went into his head and came out of his head.
Oh my.
Did
it kill him?
No. Anatoly is, as far as I know, last week was still alive.
Okay.
And you wouldn't expect him to be alive because sticking your head into a particle accelerator, that sounds like something I would do.
Yeah.
It does, right?
It does.
Sticking your head into a particle accelerator exposes you, from what I understand, and I'm no physicist, but it's somewhere between 400 and 600 times the lethal dose of radiation. Ooh. 400 to 600 times. But somehow, Anatoly survived. Maybe because it's such a pinpoint beam of particles, we don't know. He says that the experience was like seeing this blinding flash of light, and, quote, it was like 1,000 suns inside my head.
Ooh,
yeah, 1,000 suns. So the skin blisters, like you would expect from a burn or from radiation poisoning. Apparently, the left side of his head swelled up like a balloon. Right, so that it swelled up. He had some seizures after that, and then after that, he seems to be okay. He survived the thing. As a matter of fact, after the particle beam got him in the head, he went on to get his doctorate. Yeah.
Interesting. I can see why this is a well-known story. He didn't come out with any radioactive superpowers either, did he?
You know what? I've been wondering. Well, yes, he did. He got his doctorate done in 4.5 minutes.
Yeah, there you
right?
go.
He did the entire doctorate in 4.5 minutes because he stuck it. No. Although I'm wondering, maybe I should put my head into the particle accelerator because maybe that would... What harm could it do? Let's be honest.
It probably could do a lot of harm.
No, but come on, man. Like I'm dealing with nothing up there anyway, and maybe I would have a flash of brilliance once in a while if I... Do we have a particle accelerator somewhere in the building, guys?
Yeah, it's on the second basement level.
A second basement level.
Okay.
All right, we're going to go put our
that's
heads
what
in there
that thing
later and
is.
see what happens. Yeah, I think that would... No, he didn't come away with any superpowers. It does sound like the beginning of a, superhero movie or comic book, I guess, like the ones I read as a kid. He's just lucky to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason I bring this up is I thought, well, that's an interesting analogy. He's kind of like the entire human race when we deliberately... Watch this segue now.
Okay.
Right? It's when we deliberately stepped into the particle beam of sin.
Ooh, good
See?
segue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The wages of sin is death. That's what God warned us would happen. But here we are, still alive by the grace of God.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we're alive is because before anybody sinned, God already had a plan in place to save us. Sometimes people don't realize that. The plan of salvation wasn't an afterthought that God put in place after Adam and Eve messed up. It was there ahead of time. How do we know that? Bible says, Revelation 13, verse 8, that Jesus is the lamb slain from the foundation of the world, right? So that plan was already in place in case because we were created with free will, the ability to choose against God, because you can't choose for God if you don't have the chance to choose against him, and real love demands a choice. Well, we made such a bad choice. God had put a plan in place in case that should happen. That's a profound statement, really, that the whole plan of salvation was there before we ever made the wrong choice. We should probably do a whole show on that or a series on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because really the gift of Christ at the cross is not just the essence of Christianity, and it is. It's not just the basis for our faith, it is. But it is the most profound thing God has ever done in our human history. And I'm guessing we could spend the rest of our lives, maybe even all eternity, and never get to the bottom of what actually was accomplished at Calvary.
Yeah. We should do a series on it, Shawn. A whole series.
Yeah, no, we should.
That's a great idea. But it's not our topic for today, is it?
No, it's not. And it would be quite a series because what have we had? Like 2,000 years of Christianity now. And if you read all the theologians over the last 2,000 years, they've never hit the bottom of this subject, the cross, right? So, no, it's not our subject for today. But it's kind of related to our... Here comes another fantastic segue from the mind of Shawn without benefit of particle beam. All right. No, it is related to that because in Ephesians chapter 5, Paul compares the relationship between Christ and his church to the relationship that exists between husband and wife. So Paul spends a little bit of time discussing the way that Christians are supposed to coexist in their various roles. And so in that chapter, you see the relationship between servants and masters, children and parents, and then the relationship between spouses. And then he says this, right at the end of Ephesians chapter 5, or near the end of the chapter. This is verse 32. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this reason, and he's quoting other scriptures here. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. So essentially, marriage, Paul says, is like a school for heaven. It's like an analogy for the relationship between Christ and his church. And of course, in the Bible, Jesus is the groom and the church is the bride. So here's what I think we want to do today, or at least this is what I planned for us to do today. You and I both, we've got some experience with marriage. 26 years, 26 long years. Send your sympathy cards to Jean Boonstra at Box 999, Loveland, Colorado, because how do you put up with this for 26 years? And
I'm patient. I'm extremely patient.
Yes, you are. You are a very patient woman. I've known you now for more than 30 years.
Yes.
Because not too far back, we went past our 30th anniversary of our first date.
Right.
Pretty good for a guy, right? Guys don't remember what day, but do you remember what day of the year our first date was?
I do.
When? What was
September 7th.
Really? Do you remember where we went?
Yes.
Where did we? Yeah, we went. This is like a free. I don't know if it still exists, but we went to Ming's Chinese food in Victoria, British Columbia.
That's right.
And that was a freebie, Ming's. That was a freebie. But if you ever want to get mentioned on this show again, you need to support the program. Ming's Chinese food, and then we went for a little walk on the ocean, and I swept you off your feet, and to this day you still have stars in your eyes that such a handsome young man came by and asked you on a date.
We'll go with that.
Yeah, no, that's not at all
you
how it
did.
happened.
We
I was
had
nervous.
We had a great first date, and you were a gentleman, and I
Underlined,
spilled a glass
yeah.
of water on the table at dinner. That was memorable. But we went for a walk. If anyone's ever been to Victoria, BC, we weren't downtown in the Inner Harbor area there, which is so pretty. But we went to another beautiful place, which is called the Breakwater,
Yeah.
which is that wall that was big cement wall that was built out into the ocean to stop the waves from crashing onto the shoreline. And it's a gorgeous walk because
Right.
you get to go right out onto the ocean.
You get out
So
onto the
that was
ocean,
special.
and I had, a good, I don't know, it's about a 5-minute walk if you're dilly-dallying with your dream girl. And so I had 5 minutes to the end of the breakwater to charm you.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, to exert my irresistible charms upon an impressionable young lady.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were so young. When I think back to how
Too
young we
young.
were, well, we'll probably talk
Were you
about
even?
that.
Were you 18?
I was 18. You were 19, not
That's
quite 20.
terrible.
I know, we were
that is
so
too young to date.
young.
Now that we have children that age, that is far too young
We
to
have
date.
children older than that.
You
which is
shouldn't be
crazy.
dating until you're 40.
Well, that's no.
No.
I wouldn't agree with that.
I mean, Ruben's got kids. When do you want your kids dating, Ruben?
I think maybe 65.
65. Yeah. No, that's
65.
about
It's
right.
reasonable.
You don't
Yeah.
want to be a grandparent then.
Well, that's actually our topic today. We're going to get a little bit squishier than I like to get, and we're going to discuss dating, romantic relationships, and marriage. Right?
Sounds good. Yeah,
Right.
there's a lot to talk about.
Right. So I know that we don't always get things right. Well, you do. You get almost everything right. But we became Christians together. And so in our romantic history, there was the without Christ period and the with Christ period. And I think we've noticed the difference that Christianity, that Christ makes in relationships and the home.
Absolutely.
Right. So
Absolutely.
here we go. This is unprecedented. This is about as squishy and romantic as Shawn ever gets. And look at the way I'm about to make myself vulnerable to the whole world. We are going to come back and, well, I guess there's a few more minutes to go till the break, but first date, I'm going to unpack my feelings on the radio. We are going to look at each other, gaze into each other's eyes, and share our most intimate feelings on the radio.
Are we?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and at some point you need to unpack your true feelings for me because, this will be like therapy for you on the air.
Well, we're going to talk about our feelings, but we're also going to look at the
No,
scriptures.
we're not. No, we're not. That wasn't true.
And-
we are not talking about feelings.
Well, a little bit. I'm sure feelings will come up. But Shawn, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the scriptures and we're going to talk about some practical things, some things that we learned in the process, being married for 26 years. We've learned a few things along the way.
Yeah. The
Definitely.
biggest surprise about 26 years is that you didn't jump ship at 25.
At 25.
Has anybody
I
told
was
you?
in that long.
Has anybody told you that this could go on for 50 or 60 years?
Yes,
Has that occurred to
I'm
you?
well aware.
Yeah, you poor girl. 60 years. You know what I'm going to look like when we cross our 60th wedding anniversary?
Well, I'll be
I'm
right
going to
there
look
with
like
you.
I'm 35 and stunningly handsome. That's what I'm going to look like when I turn whatever age that will be. Time for a break. We're going to come back with the Bible, dating, and marriage right after this.
As you may know, the Voice of Prophecy is supported by people just like you. We provide Christ-centered programs and Bible studies free of charge so that no one is left out. If you've been blessed by these programs and would like to pay it forward, we invite you to visit vop.com/give to make your tax-deductible donation. We're equipping the world for Christ to come, and your support will make a direct impact on so many lives. That's vop.com/give.
Earthquakes, tornadoes, wildfires. Around us, homes are being lost, lives are threatened, and some people are asking the question, does God even care about me? The Bible answers that question, and what it says is very encouraging. Find out what God says regarding this topic and some of life's greatest issues in our free Discover Bible Guides. Go to VOP.com and click on Study, or call us 888-456-7933.
We are back from the break, and during the break I went and got a book about marriage so that I would have something to say in this next segment. And I read the whole thing during the break because, of course, I'm capable of that ever since my head got into the, I found the particle beam accelerator downstairs in basement number 2, as Ruben put it. No, we are talking about marriage, the difference that God makes in a marriage, the things that you can learn from marriage. We're going to talk marriage and dating. We should have saved this for Valentine's Day, because we live in Loveland, Colorado, the Valentine capital of the world. I think people actually, how does that work? They send their Valentines cards.
Yeah, it's a Valentine resending program. So you send your cards here, and
not here, not to the Voice of Prophecy.
To the Voice of Prophecy, but to the
because I'm just going to open them all and read
post
them.
office, and then they run them through their machine, which has a special, Valentine poem on it, and it gets a stamp, and therefore your sweetheart gets a Valentine from Loveland, Colorado. So where would the best information on that be? I'm not sure. City of Loveland.
I don't know. We're not here to plug that, though.
No.
But we do live in the love capital. And something I said during the break, I have a mug here that says, it says coffee on it. And somebody gave me this mug, and I don't drink, we are caffeine adverse. And so let's just make that clear. There is nothing in
it's
there.
It's just a nice mug.
No, yeah, it's just a nice mug. And it occurred to me, man, I brought this into studio, and there is no alcohol, no caffeine. It's a kosher cup. It is a kosher cup. It just has filthy tap water. That's heated up a little bit.
Tap water.
All right, let's talk about marriage and dating. All right. So here's what I want to put to you. Now that we are old and wise, or you are old and wise.
We're old and wise.
No, I haven't aged a bit. I still look 18.
You
Amen.
I had a lady this
Thank
weekend.
you, Amanda. Amanda's in the control room. She says I still look 18.
Okay, 18. Good.
Because I had a gray beard when I was 18. Okay. Now that we're old and wise, what kind of advice would you give somebody who's just getting out there into the dating market? Go Jean's advice column.
Well, it's tough. We do have daughters, one that's still in high school, but one's definitely dating.
No,
she
is not.
She went on a date yesterday.
She isn't. No, really?
But, yeah.
Oh.
But she's 20, so that's
I will find you, young man. I will find you.
No, it's appropriate.
You will regret asking her out.
So... this is very real. I talk with Natalie about these things quite often.
Are you about to throw her under the bus on radio?
Yeah. No, I'm not.
Right.
But you said, what advice would we give? Well, I mean, I guess I don't know that I do know that I don't have the answers. That's probably a good way to put it. Because as I talk through these things with Natalie, I realize I don't have the answers. But what I do have is the experiences that I've been through, and being able to look backward from 26 years back, you do realize you've learned a few things throughout the years.
Okay, so lay it on me.
Something I've said, a couple of things. The first thing I've said to her is, when you're dating, maybe when you first start dating, you imagine that there's a perfect person out there. And you have this list of qualities that you expect from your...
She actually has one, though, doesn't she?
She does.
She made a list that she prays about.
A couple of years ago, she did. And I think a lot of Christian young people do that. But I would say that's good. That's good. Pray about the qualities you want in that person. But as you begin to date, and maybe as you mature a little bit, you may realize that not all of the things on that list are keeper qualities. You know, you have to kind of say, all right, what's a deal breaker? What qualities must I see in a person? That they love God, that they're committed to Him on a personal level. Everyone has different things. But then are there things on there that, they have to have a certain career, they must be musical, they have to like...
Is that on her list? They must be
sports
musical?
Or something?
Yeah.
It was on her original list, musical. So I think... as you begin dating, not only do you meet different people from different backgrounds, you change and you mature as a person. So figuring out that balance between what is extremely important to you and what maybe isn't as important, that's part of the process. And what I would also say is sometimes, like you and I, we were very young. We went on a couple dates.
Too young.
And we it worked right away. You're the only person I dated in college because we started dating right away.
Because once you've gone on a date with Shawn, how can the other guys compete?
Yes, that's how I felt. But you're the only person I dated in college. But it doesn't always work that way for everyone, obviously. Right. And so things sometimes take time, and there's a reason and there's a purpose for that. I've just recently been studying 1 Samuel, the first 3 chapters.
Oh, that was my study earlier last year.
Okay, yeah,
All right.
The story of Hannah.
Right.
She's praying for a child in that case, but there's let's see if I can find it in 1 Samuel chapter 1. Let me just flip back over there, Shawn, while we're talking. There's something that just jumped out at me from 1 Samuel chapter 1, and it applied to Hannah as she was waiting for Samuel.
Okay.
But it applies in other situations too, and it's verse 20.
Okay.
It says, "And so it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son." And it's that process of time that really stood out to me most recently when I read that.
That was in 1 Samuel.
1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 20.
Oh, verse 20. Okay.
Verse 20.
Yep.
So
The process of
there is
time.
a process
Oh, I
of
like
time.
that.
Things happen for a reason and a purpose, and in God's timeline. The process of time in this specific story is God had a plan for Samuel. He needed him to be a prophet and a leader in Israel at that specific time.
Sure.
And so trusting God with the timing of our dating life, that's also advice I would give to young people dating.
Well, here comes the protective father. Here it comes. Here's what I've been thinking. What would it? And people come to me all the time. I remember this couple coming to me and they wanted to get married. It would seem like a hasty thing. They knocked on the church door while I was inside vacuuming or something, and we want to get married right now. And I don't do that, and it's like, I'm not going to perform this ceremony if I don't know you and I haven't taken time with you and so on. Mm-hmm. I'm with this piece of advice. Take your time. You and I dated now, this is not a formula. I don't want to be misunderstood, but you and I dated, 3.5, 4 years?
We did, yeah.
Before we got married. Mm-hmm. I think that a lengthy courtship, and this is getting hard because a lot of people now, they're hitting puberty earlier and they're kind of starting their adult life later, like in their late 20s and so on. And so they try and truncate the courtship process. But I would say you need to take enough time that you actually know what you're getting into. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter who you're going to marry. There are going to be flaws. There are going to be things that don't live up to your wildest dreams. Human beings are human beings. Mm-hmm. But you really want to take enough time to know what those are on your way in the door. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to have fun together, and we had a lot of fun dating. We really did. What you want to know before you hit the altar, and get married is, can you handle a crisis together?
Yes.
Can you handle the days that aren't so magical together?
Right.
Because it is for a lifetime, and it is so much easier to find out ahead of time that you are not supposed to be married than it is to get married and then sort that out later.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, and a 3.5+ year courtship, and then we were engaged for a 1.5 years before we were married. That worked because we were young. Clearly, individuals maybe who are dating mid-20s, later 20s, they bring some maturity to the relationship as well.
Yeah, I've seen people who are 40 and get married, but you have 40 years of life experience, and you're able to think down the road a little better and know whether or not you'll know better what you're looking at. But particularly, man, you're just starting life, make it a long courtship. Here's the other piece of advice that I've got, and this is for the young ladies out there. Now, I had no sisters, but I'm the father of 2 daughters, and I will be this honest about men. Here it comes. Young ladies, men don't change. You are not going to change the man. And I say that because, and you can correct me here if I'm wrong, Jean, but it seems to me that some women are willing to put up with somebody who's not an ideal candidate for a Christian spouse, because in their hearts they have this dream, but I will, through the magic power of love, transform this person. Love does transform people, but in the dating phase, that's a man's best foot forward. That's when he's trying. And the average male, you guys in the booth, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the average male doesn't improve the day they get married. They drop their game a little bit, and then you get the real guy. You're not going to... Ruben, I see you reaching for the control switch. Am I right? Wrong? You're a guy.
I'd say you're pretty much right. Yeah. I think that's
Dating is
absolutely
the A game. It's the A game because you're trying to win.
You're putting your best foot forward. And I've heard you share that advice with our daughters, and that's good for them to realize. That's good for them to internalize as they're dating.
Absolutely.
And I think you're right. We all change and grow and mature over time, but if we are dating someone that doesn't match the criteria that we as Christians believe is not optional, like they have a relationship with God, they, are a committed person, they're a reliable person, and we think, oh, yes, and we women definitely have a tendency to do this. We think, oh, but they'll change.
Yes.
And if we're in a relationship
will.
and I love them, I can fix them. That is a tendency we as a lot of females have. And your advice is solid. What you see in that early phase of dating, that should be, you shouldn't expect to marry something dramatically different because that's not realistic.
No, it's their best foot forward. We're really trying because the way that the male brain is kind of wired is... I know this, don't write me complaint letters for this analogy, but it's the hunting phase. I'm out, I'm going to get a wife. And so you put all of your effort into that, and then once you get married, I'm just talking about the average male. I do value our relationship. I like to think that I still try to invest in it.
You do.
But in the male mind, once you are married, you check that off of your list and you move on to the next thing. Okay, now my career or and that's kind of, and we only focus on one thing at a time. A man's dating phase for a lot of men is their best foot forward. So if you notice that somebody's got an irrational temper or that's not going to improve just because you got married and the magical power of love is going to transform them. Now, God changes people.
Yes, he does. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So date long and guys don't change.
Yeah. And we're doing ourselves a disservice if we see those red flags early on in the relationship and we think somehow that just closing our eyes to it or that it'll improve one day. We as women, we're definitely doing ours. Well, and men too, if you see those red flags in the women you're dating, you're doing yourself a disservice by not addressing that and not being real about that before you get into a marriage. It's much better to avoid an unhealthy marriage than to end one.
Here's a piece of advice just before the break for the young men, because I just lectured the young ladies. The young men, it's this. Looks fade. Yours didn't, by the way. No, you're still as pretty as the day. But looks fade, character doesn't.
Yes,
right?
True.
We're all going to turn 80 one day. Your face is going to fall off your head, right? You're going to roll over, and there's this 80-year-old in the bed next to you in the morning. And so the looks fade, but character doesn't fade. And so, I don't know. Honestly, guys are the winners in marriage, I think. We really are. But for young men, I'd say, hey, don't just chase the pretty girls and don't pay attention to character. Character matters. It matters in both directions. I hear the music. It's time to take a little break, and I will try and repair my marriage during the break, and we'll be right back.
Disclosure is just one of the programs brought to you by the Voice of Prophecy, like the audio adventure program Discovery Mountain. Discovery Mountain is a weekly Bible-based program for kids of all ages and backgrounds. Your family will enjoy faith-building stories with Jake Donovan, Mr. Simon, and others in this small mountain town. Each summer, campers visit Discovery Mountain, where they sing songs, learn about God, and reenact a Bible story with the help of drama teachers Miss Wendy and Miss Tamara. With 24 full episodes every year and programming every week, your family will have something uplifting to listen to every week. Listen to episodes on demand and watch video features from Director Doug at discoverymountain.com or on your favorite podcast platform. That's discoverymountain.com.
during the break, I had a little 60-second micro date with my wife of 26 years. That came fast, right?
Years.
Do you remember that
Really
when we
did.
were dating, we went to my parents' 25th wedding anniversary party, and now we are past that mark ourselves. The other thing that occurred to me is like quite a few years ago now, I was suddenly older than your father was when I met you. I know.
For some reason, this weekend, I was thinking about, how I did the math mentally. How old was my mom when we got married? And yeah, she was younger than I am right now, which is just so, it's just bizarre because the time just goes by so quickly.
But you still look
so
like
quickly.
you did the day I met you.
I
don't know how you do this. You're
I
like,
do not.
You're like, what would I compare you to? Like a piece of cheese. The older you get,
I'm a piece of
the
cheese.
better you get. My wife,
So romantic.
I should have been Shakespeare. What shall I compare thee to?
A
A piece of cheese.
Are they laughing in the control
Yeah,
room?
they are. My wife is like a fine old piece of cheese.
Oh, dear me.
Yeah.
Well,
And we're not
thanks,
even
I
really
think.
cheese eaters. So here we were talking about what kind of advice with an old couple like us. And it was a few years ago I realized that when I walk into a youth meeting, they look at me weird, like, what's the old guy doing here? So now I sit in this position where I can dispense advice to young people who won't listen anyway, because I didn't listen, but let's put it out there for someone who is interested in hearing what it looks like 25 years, a quarter century down the road.
Do you have any more advice for young couples?
Oh, I do.
Okay.
And this is the big one. This is the big one. God knows what he's talking about. When you see a warning in the scriptures, pay attention to it. Even if at this juncture of your life, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to you. Even if you don't see how it could possibly play out in your case, pay attention to it. And now I'm talking about, passages like the famous one in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, where Paul says, do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And so, and again, I guess, and if this is wrong, it's wrong, and I'll take, but this tends to me, at least watching as a pastor, this tends to be a problem, again, more for young ladies than young men. And maybe I'm wrong, and you can correct me in a moment, but young ladies have come to me more than young men have, let me put it that way, and said, Pastor, I really like this guy, and we're dating, and he's not a Christian. But I think that God arranged this so that I can marry him and lead him to Christ. No, God does not contradict the advice that he gives in the Bible. Don't do this. And in the beginning, it might seem like, this is going to work out. I'll go to church on the weekend, he'll stay home and watch football, but one of these days, through the magical power of love, I'll convince him to come. Now, it does happen.
It does happen.
Sure,
it does. But it can be 40 years, and there can be a lot of heartache and a lot of difficult decisions on how to where your finances go, how you raise your children, how you prioritize your time and your values.
Right.
It can be a lifetime of that.
The little things. You and I believe in the gift of the Sabbath, that God didn't give that as a rule to ruin your life, but as an amazing gift. And I know a lot of Christians are rediscovering that boy, this time with God is valuable. But now you're married to somebody who doesn't find that valuable, and he wants to have his buddies over to drink and watch football games while you're wanting to spend the day with God. That was kind of a small item. But then what happens when you bring children into the world? And you'd like to raise them in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, the way the Bible puts it, but your spouse now doesn't care about Christ, and a 10-year-old is going to look at the options saying, you know what, partying is more fun than church.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have the support system that is ideal. Now, I do want to put this proviso into what I'm saying. There are a lot of people out there that find themselves in that situation right now. And if you read what Paul writes, he says, don't leave, because if they're willing to stay in the marriage, you stay in the marriage, because who knows, that influence may come to bear fruit. And it says that, and it's interesting, in the Bible it talks about, it's always the unbelieving husband, which is more often the case. It really is. Yeah. And it says he is sanctified. Don't walk away. If they leave, that's one thing. But if you leave, you've done contrary to the will of God. There are also people who become believers in their marriage, and you're not to leave. But if you're at the front end of this, looking at this, don't marry an unbeliever. Don't don't do it. The heartache is not worth it, and I've seen so many shipwrecks because people ignored this one piece of advice. Do not be, what is it, Amos chapter 3, can two walk together except they be agreed?
Yeah.
Now, that's for all kinds of relationships, but it certainly includes the marriage relationship.
Definitely. And if you have the opportunity to think this through before a marriage, Shawn, you give the clear example of having children. I think everyone can see how a believer and an unbeliever, when you have children in the family, how difficult and complicated that becomes. But someone might be listening to us right now, either saying, well, that's okay, we don't plan to have children, or that's okay, we've already talked about it. Or, yeah.
Yes, surprise.
Or even, we've talked about it, and my spouse supports me taking the children to church. But there are so many layers there that we can't even necessarily predict, such as, will an unbelieving spouse support paying for Christian education? Will an unbelieving spouse support you supporting your local church with tithe? Those are financial examples. Then there's the time. Christian education takes so much time from a family. How does that unbelieving spouse feel about the hours that are spent in church activities and school activities? Just layers like that maybe before we're married we can't anticipate. I know I couldn't have. I couldn't have anticipated.
No, you
that.
don't understand. I mean, even though we all grew up with parents as children, you don't get the parental perspective till you get there.
No, you really don't. And so just scriptural counsel is there for a reason, and it really is. It's there to give us the best possible hope for a joyful marriage and a joyful future.
Yeah. And that's what I'm praying for our daughters, that they find, marriage is hard under the best of circumstances. Let's not lie about it. I know Hollywood paints it as once you find your one true love, it's, you're living in Disneyland from then on. That's not true. Human beings are human beings, and the sparkle goes off of a marriage quicker than you would think. There's some sparkle in our marriage. I don't mean that, but
I know what you mean.
But the shiny
Day-to-day
new
life.
thing,
Yeah.
like it's kind of like a new car. You're going to get that first dent, and it's going to break your heart, and the first dent will come. It's hard enough under the best of circumstances. Why would you stack the deck when God against yourself when God advises you not to?
Right.
Look, for our own kids. For our own kids, we have a rule in our house, and I'm not sure they've been fans of the rule. But the rule is you don't date till you're out of high school. Now, I don't want to discuss this as a prescription for every parent, just as a factual thing. This is the rule that we established in our house. So let's talk a little bit about maybe why we took that position.
Yeah, and it was a position we took. We told our daughters, you may not go out on dates. You may not date until after you graduate from high school. And it's funny, the day after Natalie's high school graduation, a boy picked her up for breakfast. So, I mean, she followed it in a way. She followed it, but I mean, I have to say, we are not perfect parents. Our children are very real children, and in principle, they know that rule exists. Does it mean that they haven't formed attachments during their high school years? Does it mean that they haven't spent time with boys on campus, at school, even though they weren't allowed to go out on a date? Of course, it doesn't mean that. They did do that. So I just want to be very honest and very real with our listeners. But the rationale for that rule was good. And it was this. It was that they're young and they are still learning who they are, and they are not really, in our opinion, they were not ready to make a permanent commitment to someone. And that's really what dating's all about. It's about getting to know people in order to find that one person that you are going to make a lifetime commitment to. And we just felt that we have one who's still in that category, so she is not, and Natalie was not ready at that stage of life. So we discouraged dating at that phase.
Well, here's the way that I've been thinking about this. Really, what is the purpose of dating? The purpose of dating is to find a spouse. And, someone will disagree with that. No, it's to have fun. I don't know, because human attachments begin to form just in the innocent conversations that happen in a restaurant, say, and you start making eye contact, you develop feelings, and you need to be ready for the potential for a lifetime commitment with that person. You are not at that phase of life when you are still in high school. I don't believe so. And again, I'm not trying to be prescriptive for other parents. And I understand that back in the 1800s, everybody knew who their spouse was going to be by 15 or 16. But then again, they were ready to start real life by 18, right? And get a job on the farm or whatever it was. I don't know that you're emotionally ready in high school. You're not looking for a spouse. So why would you get into a situation where you may form deeper attachments? It's easier to get into a relationship than out of it. And there's a lot of heartbreak because there's a lot of short-term relationships when you're when you're young. So you get emotionally attached to somebody. You weren't looking for a spouse. Why would you put yourself in that situation? I also, to be really blunt, temptation is strong when you're young. Right? The hormones are coursing through your veins. And I say that as a half-century-old male. But when you are 18 and male, let's just be really honest about it. Your hormones have a way of driving your decisions and sometimes overriding your logic. And so, Paul actually says in 1 Corinthians 7, when a couple is together and they're burning with desire for each other. That's what he actually says. It is better, he says, to get married than to burn with temptation. So temptation is real. Let's be honest about it. Sexual temptation is real for young people in particular. So why would you put yourself in a situation when puberty hits younger nowadays? Girls in particular, I understand, are hitting puberty younger, 2 or 3 years younger. Men are too. And we're getting married later. So it's no longer a 5-year window where you're looking for a spouse and getting married. Sometimes it's a 15-year window. How well are you going to handle temptation when you're being driven by testosterone? Let's be honest about it. So when you're in the phase where you're looking for a spouse, that's when you should start dating. It's not just for fun. People's emotions and emotional attachments are not entertainment. Anyway, that's maybe the male hunter mentality. I don't know.
Yeah, and we adopted this rule for our daughters to not go out on dates in high school just because we believed, based on what you and I have both just shared, that it was in their best interest to protect their hearts and protect them for when they were mature enough to be able to make these kind of decisions well that would affect them in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. I also have this sort of in the back of my mind. I think when you're in high school, you probably have bigger priorities. I said you're not looking for a spouse, but I think you probably have bigger, more urgent priorities. It's much harder later in life to go back to college, once you've started a family. I think you should get your career and your life together before you consider marriage and family, or at least know what that map looks like. And that's probably a bigger priority when you're 17 in high school than finding a spouse is. There is the music. I wanted to throw one more thought in there. Honestly, 18-year-old boys haven't matured enough to be considered as spouses anyway, and it's hard enough at 50 to be considered mature because men just don't ever grow up. There's the music. We're going to have to take a little break, and I'll go on another little micro date with my wife. We're talking about marriage and dating from a biblical perspective. We'll be right back after this.
All around us, the world is changing. Homes are being lost. Lives are being threatened. And some people are asking the question, does God even care about me? The Bible answers that question, and what it says is very encouraging. Find out what God says regarding this topic and some of life's greatest issues in our free Discover Bible Guides. You can get yours by going to VOP.com, click on Study, or call us at 888-456-7933. 888-456-7933.
Retirement planning can be a stressful process, but it doesn't have to be. The friendly people at the Voice of Prophecy can walk you through the entire process and explain all of your options based on your specific needs. Whether you'd like to set up a trust for income or make a gift that will benefit your loved ones and change lives through the Voice of Prophecy, we're here to help. To learn more, call 1-800-348-5993.
All right. I I saw them waving at me in the control booth, and they almost had me talk before we were on the air, really. Ruben, you're fired. You know,
Can't fire Ruben.
No,
Come on.
no. Well, when the show's over, I won't fire you right now, but as soon as we go off the air, you are out of here.
I'll get my box.
Okay, yeah, same one you packed last week. At least
Just
it wasn't
borrow
Hareem.
Hareem's.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Borrow Hareem's box.
Borrow
He gets
Hareem's
fired
box.
most weeks. And yeah, all right, we are back from the break. Had a little micro date with my wife. Repaired put all the divots back on the golf course of our marriage. And I don't even play golf, but how do you like that? For your father's sake, I threw a golf analogy in there.
Good job.
We're talking about marriage and dating, and not that we have achieved anything at 26 years of marriage, or is it 27?
26.
26. But I've known you for 30 now.
Mm-hmm.
Met you in 30 years ago. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about marriage and dating, and we're trying to offer our meager advice. A lot of it, is biblical advice, so that's not meager, but, what I have to offer in addition to the scriptures is fairly meager. There's a lot in there, though. So here's what I want to do. Maybe for the next little bit, Jean, is at the head of the show, at the top, we looked at that passage in Ephesians chapter 5 where Paul says that the relationship between husband and wife, he's actually driving at the relationship between Christ and his church.
Right.
And so I believe that marriage is actually a school for heaven. It teaches us something about our relationship to God. We have a Godhead that is 3 in 1. And so Christ is able to say, I am one with my Father. And then the Bible says that husband and wife are one flesh. And so you start to maybe get some meager insight into what God's love is like by looking at the relationships we have. So looking back over the last 2.5+ decades together, what has marriage taught you?
Oh, wow.
Besides
so
extreme
much.
patience.
So much.
Except extreme patience.
Well, it's taught me so much, and I want to talk about that verse. But let me just say this before I get into that. When you get married, you talk about for better or for worse, right? We all talk about that. You marry for the better and you marry for the worse. And I think, at least from my perspective, all I can share is from my personal experience. I was very starry-eyed. I was 22 years old when we got married. And
What?
I thought,
You were?
I was. I was very young.
That seems far too young.
I know, doesn't it? Especially
know.
when we have a 20-year-old daughter. Yeah. So obviously I went in, I had criteria, you met them, I went in, we were both Christians
I met
at
your
that
criteria?
point. You met all my criteria. We were both Christians when
And
we got
those of
married.
you who don't believe in miracles, you just heard one.
Yeah. No, but I think I thought going into marriage, the worst was, oh, yes, someone might get sick or we might have this struggle or that struggle, but I did not realize the depths of
Disappointment that you would suffer at my hands?
No, that's not what I'm saying. But we have been through some seasons that were difficult.
Sure.
They really were. And what I didn't realize was that those difficult, what you would call worse times, they really, when you have someone that you're committed to and you're
Right.
married to someone that meets that criteria, they are Christian as well, it deepens your relationship with each other and it helps you to grow. And so those worst times, they're there and they are plentiful. But along with the joyous and the fun and the easy times, the two together are what grow a healthy marriage. And so that I kind of thought of it going in, you have to suffer through the difficult times. And they're there in plenty.
Well, there is
but they draw you closer and they make you a stronger person and a deeper person.
There is a little bit of a trench warfare analogy there, maybe. Guys who end up in the trench together are bonded for life. And I think you're right. There is something about being in the trench together as husband and wife that, and you've often said, if something happened to me, would you remarry? Right now, my answer is absolutely not, because how could I replace what you and I have gone through together
but
for
I
the
would,
last 26 years?
I'm going to say this on the air, because I say this to our daughters.
Yeah.
If something happens to me, I want you to remarry.
No.
Yes,
no.
I do. I wouldn't want for you to be
I
alone.
can't imagine replacing this.
Well, you
and
wouldn't.
maybe it's
You'd
not
find
a
something
replacement.
different. You would find something different.
No.
Right.
No. I got my dream
appreciate
girl.
what you're saying.
I got my dream girl. So what else have you learned?
Well, let's go back to Ephesians chapter 5.
All right, let me get there.
Let's see, verse 30.
With
is what
laptop
you shared.
magic, I can be there
You
without
can be there
turning
instantly
a single
almost.
5 verse 30. Yep.
You shared it at the beginning of the program, but let me just go through it here. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this reason, and we hear this at weddings all the time, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Now, we hear this a lot at weddings, and I hadn't thought of it this way until recently. Someone shared that the reason it says specifically, it doesn't say the man and the wife shall leave their father and mother. It says the man shall leave his father and mother. The cultural implications of this were interesting to me. The wife was expected to leave her father and mother. I think that's why it's not stated here. That was the expected process. She would leave her parents and she would join her husband. And traditionally, the son of the family would be the caregiver, the provider for the parents as they aged. So the son was expected to bring his wife into his original family, and they were to live together, maybe even physically under the same roof with his parents. But this verse really gives that new couple it empowers them and enables them to be their own family. So right from the first day that they're married, the husband, who is no longer a son in the sense that he's answerable to his father and his mother, now he and his wife are the primary decision makers for that unit, that new family unit that's beginning. And so it really sets them apart to not be influenced by the mother and the father, even if they're living in their home and working together and working in business or on a farm together. And so I love that. That's a beautiful protective role that it provides for that new family. And the personal application of this verse to our lives, we were married in 93, and in 95 already, we had to leave both our parents.
Right.
First, we moved way up north in the same province of British Columbia in Canada, and then we moved across Canada, and then we moved from Canada down here to the U.S., and we've lived all across the U.S. But it's been hard in many ways. We haven't had our parents and our siblings and our nieces and nephews in our day-to-day lives. They haven't been a part of birthday parties generally and some of those milestones with our kids. But I believe that God ordained that because, Shawn, you and I, as particularly being a ministry family, you and I are so much an individual family unit, including our daughters now, of course. We really have had to apply this Ephesians 5 verse to our lives. We have become one unit. And I think as sad and as difficult as it's often been being away from our original families, that was part of God's plan for us. It really was.
Wow, you went into some depth there. I'm going to sound like a shallow. As you're mentioning that, though, I guess that's the next phase. As our daughters start their family, you're spinning off, and that is not my family anymore. We're all family, but it's not my family.
It's their family.
It's interesting, that the emphasis that the Bible puts on the nuclear family, and I want to pause and say this. I know that in the West in particular, in America in particular, there aren't too many ideal nuclear family models left. There's a lot of broken homes, a lot of single parents. We're in no way disparaging that. What we're looking at is the ideal model, and we all fall short of the ideal in some way. And so I don't want anybody to be discouraged because we're focusing on the traditional nuclear model. But the Bible does hold that out as a school for faith and so on. But I'm looking at, there's this real emphasis, and there's been an attack on that. It's not just that it hasn't done well in the West, and unfortunately, divorce rates are approaching similar numbers among Christians. I think the numbers have been skewed sometimes because when you roll in first, second, and third divorces and so on, the numbers do skew a little bit, and there is a way of looking at the metric that reveals that Christian marriages actually do survive a little bit better. Not perfect, but I'm looking at all that, and the emphasis on the nuclear family as the primary unit. I think believers need to pay attention to that God has ordained this small cell. People like to talk about small group Bible study is very healthy for everybody.
Right,
so we have
right.
this small group Bible study in our homes, and the relationships there between parent and child and husband and wife are all there to help us learn more about who God is. And so I've looked at this, and I've thought, there are some things I've learned in 26 years, and you'll be shocked to hear that I've learned anything. But number one thing I can say is a guy, and it's this. Jesus loved the bride so much he was willing to lay down his life, and
The bride is the
for
church.
her, for the church. And I've looked at that, and theoretically I got it, but I've got to say, after 26 years, there is no question that if something were to happen in our home, I'd throw myself on the grenade. And there's no explaining that. It's an instinct. I would do that. I would throw myself on the grenade to make my number one concern in life now is that you do well. I mean, at this age, my big fear is, well, what happens if I die and you're still around? Did I provide for you?
Yeah. And I just have to say, I believe wholeheartedly when you say that. I believe you that is true of you, that you would do
I would.
that.
And it's funny. It's an instinct. It's not like I had to coach myself for that. It kicks in. And so how much does God love his bride? Here's the other one that I ponder often, because I lay awake all night. You're sound asleep. You're right next to me, and you're cute when you sleep, except when you do your little, I call it the huff and puff, because you snore ever so slightly.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, you snore ever so slightly, and you kind of, I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah.
I call it the huff and puff. And it only
I know
lasts
what
for a
you
few
mean.
minutes. But you're cute. You're laying there, and I think, what an incredible gift somebody's life is. I mean, you didn't just agree to share a house with me. You get one lifetime. And you gave that to me as a gift. I can't believe that somebody would do that. And then I look at Christ, who gave everything. He gave up everything that he had in the glories of heaven to join us here in this miserable mess. He gave us his life. What a gift. And more than that, I mean, what Jesus accomplished at the cross is so much deeper than anything that you and I could provide for each other. But what a gift that somebody laying everything aside for the sake of the betterment of somebody else is. And I marvel at that, and I think, Lord, is that part of what I'm supposed to learn here? Look at this beautiful wife I got. I mean, praise the Lord, I got a pretty wife. You're good looking, and I like that.
You're biased, but that's
Yeah,
all right.
no. I think maybe that's why our eyes go bad when we get older. God is sparing
Maybe.
us the brutal reality of 80 years of age.
There you go.
But I look at this gift, and I'm starting to get just a little more of a glimpse of maybe what God has given us. He gave us everything. He's willing to pour himself out. And so from a guy's perspective, I'm thinking, I'm starting to get that. I'm still selfish. We all are as human beings. And God is selfless, but look at what he gave us. So,
Amen.
yeah, I'm learning a lot. We're going to run out of time on this show.
We are,
we have 26 years of marriage to wade through.
We should do another program.
Okay, let's
Shawn,
do another one.
because we've just barely scratched the surface on this.
Yeah.
We really have.
Yeah, okay, so we'll do more on marriage and dating, you lucky people out there. And you can take all of the very best advice from the Shawn and Jean Dating Show.
There you go.
Yeah. Here's the other part. We are still dating. I like that. I went out for... All right, we're going to run out of time. You need to visit voiceofprophecy.com to see all of the beautiful resources we have for you. Until next time, this has been Disclosure.